Three mere mortals discover their ability to create entire universes with their minds alone. Upon discovering their abilities, these three, gods if you will, join forces to create the Dark and Stormy Nights, a supercharged team of creatives with the aim of helping artists and writers around the world while combating the forces of boredom and mundanity. They are the Dark and Stormy Nights.
We're on. So, hey guys, it's Loki
God,
with the Dark and Stormy Nights. You're back. Sorry, I'm losing my mind.
A little bit. This is Tyr.
And Odin.
All right, so we're going to start changing up our format as we approach season 2, which hopefully you have voted on what we're doing, as it is in the previous episode today, 2 today's. So, but we're going to open from here on out. We're going to start opening up with a little new news.
Okay.
And we'll be ending the show with a little, the reminders and stuff. So today, we want to remind you that in this episode, somewhere around the middle, we're going to do the Mercury the Scribe's book review.
Correct.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is structure.
Yes, we're going to I'm going to start trying to be more organized and structured. I'm probably going to fail halfway through, but we're going to try.
So ideally, hopefully, a better product.
So stay tuned for that book review.
Maybe.
And don't check. Oh my God! Just don't forget to check out Nova Drake's book. You can go to her Twitter page. What was that Twitter address?
At Nova Drake Writer.
There you go. Go to at Nova Drake Writer. Check out her book. Go check out Mercury the Scribe on Twitter. She also has a YouTube channel. Go check that out. So, Odin, you got news?
All I wanted to address was we're nearly a year in.
Okay, that's enough. Next.
And we finally have an interview. It was one of the things we wanted to set up from the beginning, and it was from a listener who truly enjoys our show.
Okay. So up front, I want to apologize for the sound quality. Several things went wrong.
Yeah.
There's not much I can do about it. We're working on fixing it for the next interview. I think I know what happened, but I'm working on it.
And that's what I wanted to apologize, because I can't control it. That's life. But I was losing my voice. I was sick. And I was really annoyed because...
He had the runs.
Well, that... I had a lot of things. Yeah. But, yeah, it was our first real interview, and I wanted to, be here for that, and unfortunately I couldn't be. But I did want to say to Mafia Hairdresser, I was a fan of the Bobby Verse. I read all 3 of those books. So I knew what we were talking about at least. Sorry I couldn't be in there to comment on that. But if you're in the mood for an offbeat sci-fi, it's definitely out of the box.
Is this the one with the satellites and AI? And
yes.
that you were telling me about? I didn't read it.
I cannot sell it. You have to read it. It's really weird.
Like, I've heard it's good from a few people, but nobody's selling it to me as good.
Well, it's weird. It's
like you're saying it's good.
Yeah.
But your description doesn't sound good.
Well,
So, I don't know. But you'll have that. So, Tyr, any news?
Nope.
Okay.
I did a book review this week. You've already mentioned that.
I have mentioned it, and Tyr's going to do that for you later.
All right.
Okay. So, we're going to move on. Okay, I've got an issue here. We've been talking about this. It's actually very frustrating for me. It's making me rather irritated, this whole genre thing. Okay? I don't get it. When I was a kid, there was only a couple genres. There was sci-fi, there was fantasy, there wasn't all this other stuff. There's horror, I think, like mystery, and that was almost
Detective,
about it.
Thriller.
Yeah. Well, that was mystery, thriller is horror. Like, they were kind of together, almost. But anyways, there was maybe 5 or 7 genres.
Choose Your Own Adventure, maybe.
Now there's like 30,000. I think at last count there's 30,000.
Yeah, it's insane.
And they're not all genres. Okay, people keep trying to sell some of these as genres, and they're not all genres. Some of them you're calling target audiences genres.
Okay.
And a target audience and a genre are 2 separate things according to every source I'm reading.
All right, so can you give us an example?
They keep calling YA a genre. YA is not a genre. It is a target audience.
Well, I feel like that's why most people tag YA onto their genre. You know what I'm saying?
Right, so it's sci-fi YA. Or
right.
It's,
usually they say, like, I
horror
write, like,
YA,
YA fantasy.
Yeah, something like that. Right, so, yeah, those are not the same thing. Although YA is the only target audience tag I ever see on anything. Nobody ever says...
Well, it's either younger audience or not.
boomer fantasy. or
Well, no, that would be adult. You just market that
Gen
as adult.
X fantasy. Like, it's not a thing. So,
It's not, because at that point you're marketing
That's
as
a fair
adult.
point.
but yeah.
Is it? No, it's not. You middle grade, children's, YA, adult. Those are all
I still read Nancy Drew.
age
Shut up.
groups. Okay, and I'm well beyond young adult, but I still read YA.
Nancy's a classic.
Okay, that's good to know.
Anyways, can you guys give me some tips? How do I know what I'm writing? I'm so confused.
You research it. I mean,
So-
that's the bottom line.
Are
And
you
the
talking about your
reason,
categories?
That's why they're here.
the reason that this
So they
is
don't have
coming
to.
up in this episode is because we're going to be talking about querying later, and you need to know basically what you're selling, right?
Right.
You
And
can't sell a book unless you know your target.
while we are clear that our story is steampunk,
right.
right? I'm told that there may be other things that you might qualify for other genres.
Mhm.
Well,
Uh,
the way to think of it is
and-
meta tags, I guess, is that these are just trying to fill the gambit of all possible searchable, terms that may apply to your story.
So, like, steampunk is like a subgenre of fantasy.
Sure.
It's
It's a very specific one, though. I mean,
It is.
It is a definite niche market.
yes.
I mean, it's definite time period, a different aesthetic.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of variation in that. I mean, you kind of know what you're getting.
Yeah.
Gears and love.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't feel that it's parsed beyond the need to parse it. I think that it's a
I think
necessary
with
niche.
this one, you're right. Steampunk is a pretty specific thing. Like a steampunk fantasy is a steampunk fantasy. I
Right.
think that you market it that way, you know what you're getting. So yeah, it was probably pretty easy to know what we're doing with this one.
Now, this isn't the only book I'm working on, though, however. And in
Right.
my case, I am aware that what I'm writing is sci-fi. But then there's some question. My characters are quite young, but they're not females. And I hear that largely, and I'm not knocking anything or anything, but because I've got young male characters, one's 19 and one's 23 or something like that.
But what's the voice? Is it a mature story with mature elements? Or is it...
Well, there's dealing
More
with
childish.
finding a family and mental illness and violence and stuff like that. So there's some of that stuff going on, but it is in the future. There are robots and laser guns and stuff like that and what have you.
Is there a
I
love
think
triangle?
that largely at that point it depends on your content, and if your content is not,
Graphic?
no, it's not necessarily just that, but like YA is basically, it generally goes by your character's age, and usually it's like you have a 17 to 20 something year old
Well, that's what I'm
younger
saying.
character who is going through a time in their life, that appeals to that young reader. So it's a coming of age. Well, I don't know that it's coming of age, but it's definitely like a crush on a guy, and those
Okay,
kinds of
so
things, like because that
because
comes at that point in your life.
My characters might be like just trying to survive rather than dealing with personal
If
issues.
there's nothing that would relate to a younger reader, then I wouldn't necessarily consider it YA.
Okay.
Yeah, because the more you guys talk about it, okay, because in my head, I'm seeing these teenagers and this love triangle, and one's on another planet, and they're behind an air bubble or some crap, or they're dying of some disease or whatever. We've all seen these movies. But I think you keep mentioning that they're in the late teens, almost adulthood, and I'm like, that doesn't strike true with what I remember of that genre. But you know what? I think you're right, because they're always like 4 or 5 years past the actual audience. So the audience is younger, projecting their future selves on that. And so they're going through these things, at least in their head, if not in reality.
Like at that age, I'm going to have a bow and arrow and a boyfriend.
Well, I'll be
Well,
more
and
assertive and
also
stand up for myself, maybe.
Sometimes certain genres have almost expected tropes in them.
Rebel
too.
against the system,
so
man.
sometimes you can kind of peg your genre by the tropes that are involved.
Okay. I
You
guess I'll
know?
have to read up more on that.
So I think that the biggest thing is to know your competition. I think it's important to read similar books and know what appeals to your readers, know what points you have to hit. Like the bottom line is, whether you're self-publishing or querying, if you want to make money off of your book, you need to know who you're selling it to.
Right.
Because if you can't put it in front of the readers that it's meant for, you're not going to make any money off of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's just
And that's the whole point in genre.
nowadays it's kind of confusing with all the different genres.
Yeah, but the
and
reason that is the
subsets.
case is because in this age, there's so much coming at people that they need to be able
Sure.
to parse
Yeah,
it
it's
down
impossible to
to
find
many,
anything.
to many subgenres and everything like that. So, like,
But between the
if
meta
I'm
text and
looking
everything,
for,
I mean, it kind of drowns the search engine
it
for
does,
even
but
giving you what
but
you want.
if I were to like jump onto Amazon or whatever and say, okay, well, I'm in the mood for fantasy, so that's my genre, and then I think that I kind of want a YA novel, and I'm specifically looking for maybe like an academy, a supernatural academy. All I have to
you
type
can
in.
do that. You can
Oh,
look it up
yes.
by like
Supernatural Academy is actually a very popular.
what?
Yes, very popular. And so, like, I could literally look that up right now and come up with an absolute ton of series that I could read.
Yeah, I believe it.
Okay.
I don't know. I think YA ends when you get too descriptive when shooting children with bows and arrows.
So wait
It's
a
like
minute. I
how
thought
much-
no, but I saw Hunger
Wasn't
Games
Hunger
was
Games?
YA.
It was.
Yeah, but I mean, it was kind
I
of
think it
off-screen
was.
kills. It wasn't that like.
Oh, I don't know.
no. There's
You
some graphic shit in that.
I didn't read it actually.
But
So
but
I really shouldn't have written in dystopian
what was the
fantasy
other
if I
one?
didn't read those.
what
But
was it based off of? What was the one?
Divergent.
Oh, there's a Japanese horror movie.
Oh,
no,
yes.
that one was so much better.
I
The
didn't
original.
See it. I actually watched a little piece of one of the Hunger Games movies, and like
I watched them all.
they killed a kid, and I was like, I can't watch
At
this.
this point, well, see, for me, I watched the first one. It was okay, but I started a story, because the story wasn't over there. It was just too big for one book, I guess. I don't know. So, but yeah, I saw the whole thing. Like I saw all of them, and I don't know that the storytelling got any better or anything like that, but it definitely got more violent.
What, the Hunger Games movies or the
Yeah.
I like that they at least address PTSD a little bit in those.
Yeah,
Because,
I
I mean, like
mean-
you would.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
too many child heroes in these dystopian stories.
Yeah, they end up messed up and dead inside. And I'm like, yeah, that's about right. So, but yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I saw a little bit of advice. Some stuff I guess that I thought was common sense was just that, like, if you have magic or paranormal things like werewolves or vampires or what have you,
Your
it's
fantasy.
probably a fantasy.
Yeah, I think things get a little cloudy sometimes between fantasy and sci-fi. There are some things that straddle that line.
Yeah, I mean, well, what robots and technology, future and other worlds, probably
Right, and I almost looked at it kind of like
sci-fi.
X-Men is considered fantasy,
Yeah.
I think, but technically that's a genetic change. You know what I'm saying? That's science.
Yeah, mutant
So for
abilities though
me-
are largely considered like magic.
Yeah.
Well, because
so, I
they
mean,
really don't explain how any of it
truthfully,
works.
Genetics is science, but at the same time we consider that fantasy because they're superheroes. So, I mean, there are some things that straddle that line.
I mean, it's one thing with the guy who grows like thorny things out of his back, but then like another guy has gamma ray eyes. It's
The
like,
upside, though, is-
you're
I mean,
in fantasy at that
I
point.
had this same trouble with the Cost of Justice because there is dystopian sci-fi and there's dystopian fantasy, and ultimately I figured, because in the beginning it's all like normal world. She's not aware of this kind of thing, except for that there's this, experimental drug that they were trying to like cure everything and make people superhumans and stuff because, that's just how the elites are. They want more. They always want more. And so it was never good enough. And so like this drug actually ended up causing reactions in people. Sometimes it turned them into monsters, and sometimes it gave them, sometimes it was something minor like a faster metabolism or something like that, and sometimes it was a more, pronounced ability. And so like that was something where I was like, well, is this science? It's a drug or whatever, but at the same time it was like, well, they have powers,
Yeah, it's
so
probably considered fantasy.
right.
I think that when you
But if you had robots,
can't
Damn it, I
explain it,
forgot the
or you
robots.
don't bother to explain it, I think you end up in fantasy.
well, I don't think you have to
I
explain
mean, I
certain
explained
things.
it to
I don't.
some extent, but
I don't think you have to explain robots, and I don't think you have to explain lasers and stuff like that. But it's still sci-fi. It's not fantasy. Even though the way lasers are largely
Because that's
described
tech.
is fantasy. So
lasers and robots is it's tech. So I mean,
Right.
that leans towards
right.
sci-fi.
That's what I'm saying. If it's technology, it's sci-fi.
Right.
So, but there's so much more. I mean, like we were trying to parse thriller from horror. And
Yeah,
stuff,
that
you
one
know?
confuses me too, but it's not a genre I'm familiar
Well,
with.
thriller has suspense. Horror, if it's written well, has suspense, but
Right. But
So
yeah,
there's
I mean,
still no difference there.
like
Maybe it's the type
I've
of
always
scare.
considered
execution
not,
there
Stephen,
not
is-
just creepy, but also
not only do I consider Stephen King horror, most people consider
All right.
Stephen King horror, but there are people who say no, Stephen King's more thriller.
my favorite thriller by far The Game. If you get a chance to see that movie, it's well
yeah,
worth
but there's
it.
no monsters. There's no.
But it keeps you guessing.
No,
and
no,
every
I
time
get
you
what you're
think you know what
saying.
it is, there was points where I totally knew the story, and
Who's
they
the
so had me convinced I didn't.
Ice-T?
What?
Ice-T was the actor.
The Game?
What? No. That was
Are you talking about Surviving?
Sean Penn
oh,
and
no, yeah, no. Kirk Douglas.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Surviving the Game. That one's Ice-T.
I have no idea what that is, but okay.
That's the one where a bunch of rich people take him to an island. He's a war vet,
Oh,
and they take him to an island to hunt him, and he turns around and hunts them.
you mean The Deadliest Game?
So something like that.
Sounds
yeah.
like Predators.
They've done this story so many times.
Elites are predators, yeah.
No, but that was a definitive thriller because you had no idea what the F was going on.
Yeah,
it was
and it-
Yeah,
constantly
there was
looking a lot
no. It
on
wasn't really
edge.
horror.
But that's what I'm saying. I think that horrors
There was no horror involved in that one.
horrors are I think are usually somewhat supernatural in nature or what
Sure.
have you. You know, where a thriller
I
is
mean, a
generally
book about a
human
killer
generated.
could be, and they're
I
not.
think that may still be a thriller though,
Really?
where if it's a serial killer or something like that. But I mean, me and you might consider it a horror, you know, especially if you're in that situation, you know. But it's a human. You can
I don't
kill
know.
them.
So like again, there's blurry lines for sure, but I think that what's important is that you need to know what your competition is. You need to know what titles compare to yours and what you're up against, basically. You know, take a look at the different books that people read. Know what like those readers are your target audience, and then know that you have to hit. You know, if there's certain tropes that are expected within that genre, or if there's a certain look on the book cover, or things like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Those are things that you need to make sure that you're hitting in order to have those same readers find you. You know. And I think that even with just querying, like if you're not even going to do the book cover and stuff yourself, you still need to know. If you're appealing to an agent, they need to be able to sell your work, which means you need to be able to sell your work. And I think that in order to do that, you need to know what you're selling. So I don't know. I think that's how genre plays in this case.
Right. So
As well as title, yeah.
yeah, and it's hard to know those things.
It's
So-
very hard, and titling's even worse.
Well, because I'm not thinking about who I'm writing a story for when I write a story. I'm writing a story. You know, I'm writing a story for me. I'm not writing a story for anybody else. And yes, I
Yeah.
still hope that it gets published and sold one day to somebody.
Like, was there a greater message?
But,
Was there
and
morality?
I realize that there are people who
You
do
can write
write.
those things.
I
yeah.
do realize that there are people who write a story specifically to sell it, but most of the people I talk to don't.
No, my
they,
only point
they
was
just write a
But
story.
that's why a lot of writers struggle.
So
If you're not appealing to an audience,
right, but like we've been saying before, it feels like to some of us who've been writing all this time to write or what have you, that is a career, that is a job. If you're writing a story to a person, that is a job. If you're writing a story for yourself, you know what I'm saying, and still
that's
plan,
fine.
still
if
hope to
that's
sell
your
it.
goal is
or
to
whatever.
to hobby write, then do it.
That's art. You know, I'm not saying it takes no less talent for either one of them.
Oh, no.
What I'm saying is that one person is trying
I
to
don't know.
create
I think
a
that
work
if
of
you
love,
can-
and somebody's trying to create something to sell to somebody.
I
You
think
know.
Not
if you love
necessarily
it
the
and you have
case.
talent, it's going to sell because that'll translate. There will be an audience for it.
That's what I think. I mean, when my story is finally done, I think
Will
that
the audience find it?
So-
Well, that's a whole nother thing
but
that
I
I'm
think
learning
that's,
from this.
That's unfortunately a symptom of the system that's in place. You know, I mean, it's just how it's
It's
built.
like any product. I mean, the thing is that you can write something beautiful for yourself and, put it out there. And I'm sure there's going to be somebody out there who loves it as much as you do. But there might not be a ton of those somebodies. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So, I mean, the bottom line is that if you are hoping to make money off your writing, then it's like any other product. There has to be people to buy it. I can't make a product that no one's going to purchase, that no one would ever need. You know what I'm saying? Like there are certain genres that just read,
Nope.
certain age groups that just read more.
Nobody needs cross.
Oh, that's true. I mean, some of it's going to be more marketable than others, but I do feel that, like, unless you're being really, really weird or you're not good, there's going to be a group for you. It
Yeah,
may
the-
not be a large one, but there's
Then
going to
that's
be
the
The
some.
point,
problem
is
is,
you might,
I don't
you
think
know.
we always know who our audience actually is. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean you didn't write a masterpiece necessarily. It just means that you don't necessarily know who's going to think that very thing. You know, It also doesn't mean you did write a masterpiece, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I think some of us might think we're writing to one audience and
I
we're
think
writing
there's
to
a
another.
happy
It's
medium,
hard.
though.
And that can happen, and you can absolutely, you know, pull your book back, maybe rebrand and change your cover up and make sure you're hitting the things to match up that audience, and then re-release it and see how it does.
I think that, like, once you have the idea and you start making the framework for your story and you start getting to writing it out, I think that you can follow a passion of love, but be in mind of what sells and maybe pepper it in if it doesn't distort or ruin your story.
Right.
So
yeah.
if you're mindful of it, you can bake it
Well,
in.
you may have many elements of what sells out there. It's just that I don't necessarily, like I said, I read horror and write sci-fi, two different things, you know. So I don't necessarily know in sci-fi what are the points that everybody wants, and not to mention I'm not everybody. Just because I like something in sci-fi doesn't mean other people like that about sci-fi, you know.
No, but you can see what's popular in sci-fi, and you know,
Actually,
it really wouldn't hurt to read a few books in your genre to know what people like if you want to make money off of that book.
So
But again, I say that's a choice. You don't have to make money off your books,
yeah.
and you might strike gold on something, in you know, inadvertently. It's just not the best business practice if you're trying to bring income off of it.
I feel like, though, even if you do everything right, there's no guarantee you're ever
There's
gonna
not
And
ever
that's
a
what this
guarantee.
episode is inherently about, because as we're going through these, Tier's proven to be a bit of an, I don't, at least an expert from our point of view, because there's so much business around the writing. There's so much to do
Expert is
after
not
the fact.
the right word there.
Oh my God, the services and programs, and the different things that you delve into. I can see why people either self-publish or find an agent as quickly as they can, because doing this on your own there's a lot of work. There's definitely a lot of work to do
It
this
is, but I
right.
mean, it's also to the degree that you want to do it. Like, how involved and how much work do you want to take on in doing this? It all depends on what you're looking for. If writing is a hobby for you, if you're just trying to create art and put it out there, I mean, those are perfectly fine goals to have, and it just depends on what your
I don't know.
goals are.
I guess it was Pollyanna in my head, because I was just like, you write something, you love it, you put it out there, and I'm sure somebody will find it. But
Right.
dear
And somebody
God,
probably will.
no.
And
The
then
more I look at this, I'm not so sure.
No, they may, and then
There's so much out there self-published right
they
now.
may find you, and then they may say, you know, let's just change everything about it. You know? So, just like the rock
That's the
industry.
other end of it. Yeah,
That's something that bothers me about the idea
like
of
I'm
publishing.
open to improvement. I understand that, like, editors and that they do
Improvement,
know what
yes.
sells. They do know what can be cut, but
it's like
how much
like I was saying.
art
And
is
that's the
lost.
same
How much is
concept in
intent?
like if you're self-publishing, putting it in front of readers and then giving you feedback that you don't necessarily like, but they're the readers. So you have to
Right.
consider, does your audience like this or not? And if not, again, you're writing something that people aren't going to like.
just remember, what does the fox say used to be a top-selling song. So popular doesn't always mean good.
And there are times when something is going to take off and just nobody has any clue why.
So, all right, we'll be back after a short break, after a word from our sponsors.
Why my drippings will go?
Because you were listening to the Dark and Stormy Nights podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Podbean.
All right, and we're back. So we're going to talk a little bit about querying. And this is something that I've heard many people express frustration with. And honestly, so I did some research on it, and thanks to Tier for some good sources, I was able to read several articles on this. And they all had something slightly different, which can be confusing. In fact, almost all of them had the order of operations changed on this, and but they had a few things that kind of stuck together. It's basically the same thing from...
Sometimes it's rearranged.
Yeah, it's just the order is different. But
sometimes agents have a preference.
Yeah, so be sure to go and check what these agents' preferences are before you take our advice on this. But largely, it seems that those who don't specify what they want will want this, what we've come up with. So, unfortunately, unlike boring normal people jobs as writers, you need to convince people to look at your work. So this goes like 1,000-fold for the writing industry professionals like editors and agents, and you will need this query letter.
What was that querying site? Do we want to?
Yeah, that was one of the things that I think is pretty popular these days as far as querying goes, and it's called Query Tracker, I believe. Yeah, Query Tracker. And it actually has lists of like agents and publishers and stuff, and anybody who's already queried is probably well aware of this site. But you can sign up, and it'll have the different agents listed, their genre preferences, things like that.
How they wish to be contacted, which
How
could be
they
done
w-
through the site itself.
Yeah, sometimes it can be done through the site. It can be sometimes some of them will accept email, some of them will accept paper mail. Most of them don't, from what I've seen. And it would generally have information about the agent, and then also their preferences and how to query them.
And that was one of the notes that Loki found for us in making this whole query
Outline.
form, whatever that you've created from coupled together, is that they expect you to get some sort of personal touch, to know a bit about them, to address them personally. Why do they? Why?
No, that's not exactly true. In some cases, yes. So you may meet agents or editors who want to query a letter in person, sometimes at conventions or through contests or various other things, or hell, at the bar at the airport.
And they want to know how you know them or why.
And it is considered good form to include this, especially a lot of them may ask you to do this very thing. And it's just because unless they asked for it, or sometimes it may just be that I found through whatever website or through your agency that you're accepting applications for steampunk comedies, so this is my query letter, so
I think that one of the points that was made was that if you have talked with them at a conference or something
Right.
like that, or if you were referred by somebody that they know, those are points that need to be made in the query. So I'm sure it's so that they know to give your work a second glance.
right, yeah.
It just sounded weird, like you almost had to stalk them. Like, how much do you want to read into them?
That is something that I've
Sounds
seen,
creepy.
is that you cannot just do to whom it may concern or just do a general letter to everybody. It doesn't work like that. That you should address it to the specific agent and note why you're submitting to them specifically.
It sounds like you're almost going to be writing an entire book just in query letters alone.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean,
It's a process.
So
I don't know. I'd be a little weirded out. I'm like, if someone goes on Facebook, finds out the name of my hot rod car, and then references it, that would be like,
Okay,
Your
that might,
Sharpay is
that
lovely.
might be a bit too much.
yeah,
You want to
back
stick to
off,
their
back off.
professional.
I too have a Hot Wheels bed.
Oh, good Lord. Don't do that.
what's the number in your CB?
Does yours have a custom license plate too? So, anyways,
For all the fans of Grandma's Boy.
the requirements are of the query letter are 1 page, single spaced, or approximately 200 to 400 words. Of course, a solid understanding of your own story premise, and believe it or not everybody has that. And a completed, finalized, post-edit, and polished manuscript. Seriously, don't send a query letter unless you're done. So, because while it can take months sometimes to hear back, it could also take a day or two, And not to mention, you might think, oh, I'll send this a month before I'm about to be done. I'm going to keep editing or whatever. Month comes around, you're not done.
Books take a lot of polishing.
Yeah.
And especially if you're going to be querying, you want to make sure you have a finished, polished product.
Well,
So-
if you're like Stephen King and you can stamp this
Yeah,
thing
he
out
can
in 6
toss
weeks,
it,
fine.
right.
But for the
Stephen
rest of
King
us,
isn't querying.
for the rest of us normal humans, you might want to not put yourself up against a deadline before you have to.
So once again, address this agent personally, not to whom it may concern, but who's our agent's name?
Miss Jane Doe.
Miss Jane Doe. So Miss Jane Doe, we're talking to you, kid. So, on here it says Miss Smith, now that I'm reading that in blue.
Well, that's because
That's what I
that,
went with. Because
Yeah,
Jane
that
Doe
is-
was found at a morgue.
That's the one that Odin wrote. I went morbid.
Oh, okay. So Miss Jane Doe's probably not going to answer us back because she's in the morgue.
She's had a bad weekend.
But what we told her
She
was
might like our story premise, though.
after reading her interview with X Magazine, your interest in steampunk stories, I have sent this query. So, that's, I guess, so personal and good explanation as to why we're sending it, Hopefully you have...
Well, I mean, I have the second example that we can read at the end once you've gone through
Oh,
all
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
So it's a little bit
Yeah,
different.
yours is better.
Oh, come on.
It is a little more polished.
It's a little bit different, but yeah.
So, hold on. I lost my place.
I think that after that, you also mentioned the conventions, conferences, things
Yeah, we
like
jumped
that.
ahead
Referrals.
of what I was saying.
Yeah.
So, and then the query apps and stuff we mentioned as well.
Mm-hmm.
Title, word count, category, comparable titles.
So yes, how do we start? So just as a suggestion from what I've heard, for openers, you want to give the stats and the info of your story. So in our case, we have the title. You want to give the title. So we've gone with. Wow, you've got a lot of stuff on here.
Death, dreaming, and devilish things.
Death, dreaming, and devilish things. I did like that one.
Current working title.
So
I like it.
We've had worse working title. I'm still stuck on Gears of Love. But our word count's roughly 75,000 words. General audience, steampunk, and urban fantasy. And comparable titles, I don't know, Carnival Row. Why don't you message us if you think if there's something else you've heard of that's comparable with us? I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I'm not an avid reader in this genre, so it actually would be helpful if you are.
So, right, yeah. Well, like I said, I read horror. I do like steampunk, but not enough to read it avidly. So.
I feel like a few of the adaptations that end up on TV, but I haven't found many that it's a weird genre. It's not often done well.
I'll be honest. Mostly I just dress up as an artificer and hang out at Walmart. So, then you need to give need-to-know information such as own voices, or if there's many points of view or unique narratives. And stuff.
Okay, is it okay to skip that altogether? Is this a mandatory one?
I think you could skip it.
Well, if you don't have anything to put in here, yeah. I mean, there's nothing to put there.
We do have a
gay
character, but I mean, do we...
No, if you're particularly an own voices author, that would be the place to put that and everything.
So, and then make sure to do this all, not as a list, but as a paragraph. And make it, I can't stress this enough, make this all brief. So, next you're going to give the hook. Give us like one-line intros, the main character, and tell us what all is at stake. And then we're going to get into the first paragraph.
Do you want to read what you got here?
Do you guys want me to jump over to mine?
Are you talking about the whole letter, or do you want to wait till we get through the whole?
Oh, yeah, she kind of wrote it as a block.
Right,
Maybe
that's what I'm saying. Let's get to the
Go through
letter.
everything and then get back to it.
So next, there's pretty much 3 paragraphs that you're gonna lay out to kind of give an idea of your story. Never, ever, ever give away the ending. So not in this. That's not where you're not doing that here. You're not giving away the ending in this one. That's for later.
Okay.
If they want a synopsis or whatever.
Right. But this, don't give away that ending. So, paragraph 1, you want to intro your main character. Tell the person you are querying who your main character is, what makes them unique, different, and set them apart, and then set them up for what is about to happen. Tell us what drives your main character, what or who they are, want, or need before the inciting incident happens. If there are many characters and perspectives, maybe either focus on the main character or point out how they are all relate to each other, and why did the main character choose to act. In paragraph 2, maybe set up the first domino. What begins the change in your main character's life? Once you have introduced the main character, tell us what happens and that starts the journey. And what was the incident that started it all? Who or what stands in their way? And what are the consequences if the main character fails? What is at stake? So.
Something else that we mentioned that may help you in writing this is referring back to your story circle. Again, we did this with the blurb as well. This is not horribly different, but referencing back to that story circle may help you to determine these things and what to write here.
True, yeah. And in this case, in my personal case, I don't end up keeping the story circle, but I might now that I've had this advice. But luckily...
Yeah, we had to regraft it on between 3 authors and many episodes and a whole lot of changes. We
Yeah.
weren't sure if we even followed the story circle anymore, and it feels like, for the most part, if we tried or not, we're still in it firmly.
I think for my personal story, this has taught me to keep an ongoing story circle. If things change, maybe changing it up. Because it did end up giving me a better understanding of our story as we did it.
Right, we did change one of the motivations towards the beginning that we didn't have before.
And we haven't told you guys about it yet. So it's going to be an all-new surprise for you when you do hear it.
It's something I do with my other books is I just keep it just at the end. I keep my frame there. And
Yeah.
that way, as things change, I add to it. Or sometimes things get taken out or whatever as the story evolves.
Yeah, it's not a bad lesson. So, and in paragraph 2, just tell us how the events shake up the life of the main character, and how does it begin your plot. And then finally, paragraph 3, give a brief explanation on how the main character responds, how they deal with the change, and if or how it leads to the journey. What is the conflict or confrontation? Is the conflict or confrontation a someone, something, etc.? And then next, finish the query. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that one part, didn't I?
I think you're right.
Oh, that's right. I set up that sentence. I didn't know if that helped you guys at all.
Oh, your Mad Libs. My mind kind of just skipped over it.
Well, you can do the stakes like that. I call it the movie man thing, because back when we were younger, they would go, in a world where so-and-so does this happens, and these are the stakes. So
Right.
if the main character doesn't do the action, then the consequences will happen, or they will need to make a choice between a thing or person and another thing or person. So that you can fill in what your main character is, what the action is, the consequences, and then the things or the persons. So just like the old movie commercials. Once again, under no circumstances do you give away the farm. Do not give away your ending.
That was actually one of the suggestions that you have in here. You kind of skipped over, but you were talking about actually like wording it so it kind of reads a little like the old movie commercials.
Yeah.
It has some of that same panache.
And then you're going to add one small paragraph, very small, about the author. This is more about your story than you, and it should include who you are, something interesting, possibly like a cool hobby, credentials in writing, in the writing world, if any. It's okay if you don't have any. Most people don't.
Or associations.
Associations.
Sort of a
things like that.
micro bio.
Yeah, something like that. But keep it very short. They don't want this should all fit on one page. And that should be good. But and then a little closing remark, 1 to 3 sentences. Thank you, a thank you for reading or whatever, but keep it really simple. So, and you have an example?
Yeah,
right?
you want me to read? It's actually like really brief.
Yeah.
Oh, I was
fine.
going to say, I don't know.
That's fine.
Okay.
All right.
And then I didn't even do the closing remarks because I feel like people can probably figure that out. So this one is just, it's very abbreviated. Dear Miss Jane Doe, we've read that you're currently looking for exciting steampunk adventures, and as such, we believe you will enjoy Death, Dreaming, and Devilish Things, a 70,000-word steampunk fantasy. The recently widowed Meredith, an unassuming expert thief, leads a team of outcasts to find those responsible for her husband's death and possibly save the world. In early 1900s England, this unlikely team of supernatural exterminators catch the ire of a group of villains after a job gone wrong. In their quest for answers, they've become the target of this scheming cult leader with a god complex. When things escalate, putting the fate of all non-humans in the path of destruction, they'll need some help from beyond to save their city. Fans of Carnival Row may enjoy this title. The Dark and Stormy Nights are 3 writers and podcasters with an existing audience eagerly awaiting the release of this book. And then you would put your closing comments after that.
That's pretty good.
I could probably have squeezed some more credentials or whatever in there, but there's really, or maybe a little bit of the Dark and Stormy Nights, like about the nights kind of thing.
We could brag about our 3
Yeah.
listeners.
I mean, well, no, I mean, if it's,
we're like almost at 1,000 downloads and everything. Like those things can go in there.
Sure.
that's what I'm saying. If it can help sell us
We're
and therefore sell the work.
We're almost an influencer. So
I don't know if I'd go that far.
You should follow her Instagram. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, closing remarks, yada yada.
Okay. I think that's good. You want to come back after a little break?
Sure.
All right. We'll see you in a minute.
In a topsy-turvy world, it's nice to have something that makes sense. This isn't it, but we hope you enjoy it anyways.
All right. So we return with Mercury the Scribe's book review.
Indeed, we do. Okay, so for those of you who are already fans, Mercury put out a book called Origin Effect, which is a novelette. I'm going to read to you a little bit about the book. It's time to go back from whence we came, back to the origin. After their cruise ship goes down in a freak storm, Peyton and 4 other survivors find themselves stranded on a tropical island with nothing but miles of ocean between them and the rest of the world. But all is not lost. The strange island comes with a variety of fruits and its own pool of fresh water, enough to last for weeks. With renewed hope, the survivors settle in. However, as night falls, they soon begin to realize their paradise may actually be their hell. They will discover a mysterious source, ancient carvings, and a terrifying secret in the form of a tropical guise. Now, this was a pretty fantastic book, but this is not the first book that I have read by Mercury, and if you guys have not looked up this author, definitely check out. I think they're on WordPress and YouTube and definitely Twitter. So definitely check out their work. They have posted on the blog a couple of different stories. Some of them are in segments and everything. So like I said, not the first story I've read by this author, but I've never read anything that I didn't enjoy. It's always an unexpected twist or something that I did not see coming. Really great endings. I highly recommend the book and just the author in general.
Yeah, we love Mercury on this show. So you can find a copy of her book review on our website, thedarkandstormynights.bigbaseermedia.com. I've also got it posted to Twitter, and you can find Mercury on Twitter. That's where we found her.
Absolutely.
And she has a YouTube channel, so go check out her YouTube channel.
All the entire author bio is also posted into the book review, so you should be able to find everything.
Oh, you got some links and stuff?
If you just go to the post.
Wonderful. Great. So now we're going to talk about the synopsis, and hopefully, if you get a query, if your query gets accepted, they'll ask for a synopsis next. Okay. So I did a little research on this, and I discovered that the requirements are 1 to 2 pages, single-spaced. Now, this will more often than a query letter vary in what the agents want. So definitely be on the lookout for anything specific they're asking for. But because what I'm offering you is a general. They're saying that this is generally what they want, but a lot of these agents want something more specific.
So you may have to tweak this depending
Definitely, yeah.
But it's probably a good idea to have one written in advance.
Especially if you're querying a lot of agents, I might at the very least have a good shell.
Right.
It sounds like you're tailoring all this for every single person, but to have something to start with is probably a good idea.
It seems like a tedious mountain of work, but,
And as you said, this is a follow-up, so have this before you even send the first thing in.
The road to fame is paved in pain. So.
It's poetic.
Yeah, it's probably true, too. I don't know. I do drugs. So, once again, always double-check their submission rules and guidelines. The synopsis, while the word synopsis elicits the thought of a general outline or brief summary, for some, the synopsis should be, yes, succinct, but also quite clear. It may be difficult to hit all of the key points with a page limit to your synopsis, but it is important that you stick to that page limit, especially if they specifically give you a page limit or word count on through their rules and guidelines.
Sounds a little like an elevator pitch. You want to have it as streamlined as possible.
It might be a little more than an elevator pitch. It should be probably a little bit more detailed, and you might not agree that all the details are the selling points because, for instance, some of the things that were suggested that you cut out. So there's no perfect way to write a synopsis, as books all vary so widely in style and structure. That is why I say it is best to lay out your beats and points from chapter to chapter in order from start to finish. Make sure it is easy to follow along. Now, likely once you have fully developed these points and beats, you'll have far surpassed your page limit.
Which
now-
is good because there's editing coming.
Oh yeah. You're gonna trust me. I mean, I don't know. I still think I personally would have trouble getting down to the word count or the page limit from there. But
I mean, what you've written here is brutal. The exact wording is quite brutal. I would probably want 5 times as much.
yeah. So now it's time for surgery. Many of the things you will cut will be later read in the story itself. So don't be quite so upset. Some of these things, for me, like I consider these my baby. You know, the story is my baby, and I'm about to take a knife to it. So
Yeah, but it's probably easier to cut things out of your synopsis than it is to cut it out of your story. You know what I'm saying?
right, but you're kind of butchering the idea. Even
The problem
That's
is
true.
you're so in love with your work, you know it.
You feel like
you know
everything is important.
in a way that
Yeah.
other people
Right.
don't. And the only way to understand it is understand its backstory, its history, where it comes
Right,
from,
right.
why does it.
So all the details.
so you
are
understand.
And nobody gives a crap. This is like
No.
the
No,
dream
they don't care.
when you're canoeing on a river of chocolate. No, nobody cares. They're already asleep.
So as you understand, cuts will need to be made in order to give them what they want. So buck up and make the necessary amputations. Start by limiting the synopsis to the main plot of the story. If you're like me, your stories are rife with subplot and backstory, but you do not have the space in your synopsis for all of that. Which brings me to my next point. Limit backstory and history. We don't need your entire world history. There's no time for all of that. Frame your world at most especially if it is starkly different from reality, but do not get too in-depth. You are limited on space after all, and it is absolutely important to gloss over it or omit it altogether. There's no space for you to go into a rant explaining your story or trying to get us to understand your themes, context, or thoughts, or why it is like it is. It is not, excuse me, it is not the time for that. Get rid of those. Next, remove unnecessary description, especially of characters. If these details do not directly matter to the story, the agent will not need this information. If you thought cutting the description was bad, now I'm going to ask you to cut and leave minor characters that are not important to the main story on the cutting room floor altogether. Just get rid of them. It's not even worth explaining the guy that...
Yeah, I think that, okay, so we have an ensemble cast. It's a team. I think if we were to write it, I think the best way to handle it is as the character becomes relevant, if the character becomes relevant to explaining a point that moves the story forward in a synopsis, then you mention them. Otherwise, don't. It's who cares if there's 5, there's 8.
Right,
if they don't exactly advance exactly what
if
you need
they're
to tell.
not like a point
Who
in the
cares?
plot.
Like Poppy's an alchemist, great.
Oh, worse than that.
So what?
Okay, so-
Someone has a potion. It doesn't matter.
Hank and Bill, was it,
Yeah.
in our story?
Oh God, they would not be in it.
Right, but they may end up being major points of comic relief in the story. But it's just not something you're going to.
I'm just saying that there might be whole characters on the team who
There
are major
would
players.
be characters
but
within the main team that would be left out completely.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, maybe,
Like
yeah.
Zara and
They're just a
Hammond
team. You
are
know,
two
whatever.
of the like most commonly like written about characters, and they would probably be left out because they're not huge plot points.
Right. Yeah, they may move the story along, but
Right. Whereas Wilhelm was, kidnapped by the Jorogumo, and he would probably be mentioned. You know what I'm saying?
right, yeah.
I'm not even sure if that qualifies as a major plot point for something that we're trying to be this brief about. I mean, maybe.
I don't know. I mean, it's. I feel like it also probably partially depends on how much world building you have to cram in there.
So the next thing you want to do is structural editing. Make sure that it makes sense, that you didn't cut something so necessary to understand the story.
Right.
Try to make the cadence look and sound good. Reading out loud is good, especially to another person. It should sound natural and not like you're panicking because I'm just imagining doing this. Like I was like writing this, and I'm like, oh my god, I'd be hyperventilating. Like, how do I even do this? How,
Does
especially
this
in
sentence
the
have
story.
5 commas?
Well, especially no. Well, yes. First off, because you're writing to somebody who can make or break whether your story ever gets published or whatever. But secondly, you're trying to describe an entire novel in 2 pages. You know, and in our case, we've got, like you said, an ensemble cast. There's a whole team involved here.
Right, which kind of
And how do we
complicates
get
things.
this down to 2 pages?
how do
know?
you encompass the story without half the cast? Yeah.
But you know, on the other hand, don't make it sound like a PowerPoint or robotic
Right.
statement. You know,
That's the thing,
Shouldn't
is
be
that-
bullets. Don't go. You know, A then B then C or 1 then 2 then 3. Don't do that.
Well, maybe as an
Oh, really? It
outline
should still be like paragraphy.
yeah.
to keep pacing, but at somewhere, and you got to fill it out so that it's
so-
interesting.
You're right. I do work like that. I write points on the paper and then I turn it into a
Right, that's what I'm saying.
flow. you
Okay,
know?
well, I think the way to look at this, and believe me, this is totally not the way I work. Well, not the way I naturally work. I have to learn this. The way we were talking about, like, I love description, bullcrap. I had to teach myself that. And sometimes I have to dial back because I overcompensate. Well, Loki, he likes to follow, a story circle. He likes to follow an outline. He's good at that. I had to do that because otherwise my stories just meander off into the abyss. They go off in weird directions, which is fun, but it doesn't go anywhere. So the same thing is what I'm trying to say is with this is that you kind of want to do it like poetry. It has an A, B, maybe A, B, C, whatever. You know, there's a repeating structure, and when you know the rules, you can keep a flow. And if you can do that, you can keep an interest. So,
Right. So I don't know. I like I said, I haven't tried this for my personal story, and we haven't tried it for this story yet either. So it just the thought of this whole thing was very daunting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, truthfully, we have the story circle, which would be basic framework, but it would be a lot of filling in to create this synopsis. And I don't want to do it already. So
It's a book report on roids with lots of judgment and no red ink. It's
Well,
just
yeah.
a straight up no.
It's a book report on your own book, you know,
Right.
that is also a sales pitch.
But don't oversell it.
But
Oh,
don't
and then
oversell it and cut all kinds of
also,
stuff that.
per Loki's note here, it also requires editing. So, yay, you weren't done with that.
Oh yeah. Just when you thought you were done editing something, go back and edit this. Seriously.
Well, yeah, you
And-
don't want to send something
and
that's
sti-
going to, like, advertise that you're bad at grammar. I mean,
Well, right. So you want to make sure the standard stuff. Get rid of those redundancies. No, you know, keep in mind that a lot of us like to do that. And then this happened, and then that happened, and then
And then.
and then. Yeah, don't do that. Don't. You know, it's gonna look bad. You know, and that's why I said read it out loud to somebody else who cares. You know, don't do it like I do it, where they're watching TV while you're reading it. So, but. You know, I think that's the best way to pick up on these things. I know personally, I find that reading things out loud, even to myself,
Oh,
I
yeah.
pick up more things. You know,
things always read different out
well,
loud.
I trip when I'm reading something and something's wrong. You know, in my head, I don't trip, but if I'm trying to read it out loud, I will suddenly trip on that thing I wouldn't.
Well,
have
yeah,
tripped
because
on.
you suddenly got hard consonants next to each other or weird
Right, because
pacing that needs a comma that doesn't.
when you're just reading it to yourself, your brain will fill in the missing things
Right.
because you know what you meant to write.
Right.
And so that's the problem with like self-editing and stuff, and why everybody says you need a second pair of eyes on your work. And I'm not going to argue one way or the other on that, but the bottom line is that that's just a natural thing that happens, and you either need to train yourself to not do that,
Right.
or you need to make sure somebody else is looking at it.
So, well, like I said, don't forget to get rid of redundancies and filler words. We tend to drag on when we're nervous too, and you really do not have time for that in this. You're trying to give the best idea of this story. If you're dragging on, that's space that could have been used for other detail that would have probably been more important. So,
Yeah,
make sure
so-
you didn't do any of that. And then, last of all, of course, make sure it is grammatically sound. You know, you want to give the best example of your work you can,
You
even
want to
though
make a good impression.
even though this may not feel like the best example of your work because of the rules imposed on you.
And how stripped it is, yeah.
Yeah, you still have to do your best job to make it seem like you know something about writing things. So,
And that's the problem is you spend all this time writing your book, and then when you're done, it's like, okay, guess what? You're not done.
Yeah, it's
now
not
you need
over.
a title. And then once you're done torturing yourself with a title that's going to grab everybody's attention and hasn't been used a million times, then you got to write your blurb. That's worse than writing your actual book. And then when you're done with that, then you got to write your query letter. And then when you're done with that, you got to write a synopsis. And
Right.
truly, it's this like never-ending torture. I don't know what's the word for it.
I'm not
Not
sure
to
Tears
mention
had enough booze tonight.
Social
She's getting
networking
bleaked
and all
on us.
that. Going
I
on to
just-
Twitter and all that nonsense.
The whole
Oh, and then
yeah,
Twitter becomes a
marketing and
distraction in
The
itself.
whole process
I have
is
a
just
question.
daunting. Yeah.
As it you've actually completed a work,
Go buy
is
it.
there a certain degree of depression or just like
Yes.
what now or whatever? Because with
Oh, there's-
all of this, I got to wonder what happens right when you finish.
There's book drop. I've heard about this book drop. You finish a
like
book.
as a reader, I know what that is. As a writer, I'm not sure.
You finish. I've heard about this from other people where they finish the book and then suddenly they curl up on a couch and never get back up again.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like
So
So you got to go from that to selling yourself.
either
Yeah.
you, yeah.
no,
Jesus.
for me it's a little bit better because I generally write series, but the problem is
So
that
the story's not over. There's
yeah,
more to tell.
Well, I generally go straight into book 2, and so basically, rough draft of book 1 finishes. I put it aside. I rough draft of book 2 starts. And then go back to book 1 when you've given it a little bit of a break and can look at it with fresh eyes to do editing. And then hate yourself while you're starting book 2 and rereading what you messed up in book 1. And so the problem is that when you reach the end of that series and you have to say goodbye to characters that you grew to love, that's when it really is bad.
I can't believe you're working on the second book while still cleaning up the first book. I don't know how you keep the motivation to keep doing the grueling part of it.
So in my story, it will eventually be, you know, a series as
Mhm.
well. And because there's so much intertwining plot and everything,
Oh, sure.
I am writing stuff that may get applied to the next
Oh,
series.
yes, absolutely.
Or,
Same.
You know, I have to pull that thread along and be like, all right, that's going to end up here in
Yep.
another book, you know.
Yep. The basic plotting of book 3, which I'm planning a 3-book series for Cost of Justice, for example. The plotting of book 3 has been pieced in since I was still early on in book 1. Now the story circle for it didn't really come together until closer to the end of book 1. I mean, I knew what was going on like midway through, but I didn't actually like.
As applied through 3 books, you mean? The larger story circle? Or?
No, the individual story circle.
Okay.
And so right now I have documents for both book 2 and 3 with their story circles and notes, and those kind of get added to as I move in through, like, oh, wait, I'm going to need to add this in there, or like build on, or I just an idea pops into my head and I'm like, ooh, I can put that in here.
Is it
you know?
firmly structured out, or might there be a book 4?
I don't think that I'm going to do book 4 for that series. It's not a highly marketable genre.
No, I just
So
meant like
my-
you feel like the entire
feel-
stories can be done in the 3-story arc.
Yeah, I think that book 3, the length of it is going to be, it's still up in the air. I don't know how much it's going to be like, oh, I got to cram this in there and cram that in there. But yeah,
3,
no,
part
I'm
1.
pretty firm on 3. I'm not willing to really go through all the extra effort of a 4th book in that series just because, like I said, it's not highly marketable. I mean, I could focus my energy on a book that's actually going to, you know, bring in money or
Right.
whatever.
So, I think that's pretty much it for the topics, right? So, what we do have, though, is my computer screwing up just as I needed to get into something.
Okay.
Thank you, computer. All right. So, I want to remind you to go check out our website, thedarkandstormynights.vegvasirmedia.com. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at thedarkstormyk1. You can also follow Tyr at Nova Drake Writer on Twitter. She has a book up for sale, The Cost of Justice.
Oh, and if any of you are on Facebook, I just created a Nova Drake author page under Nova Drake Writer as well. So I'm very lonely. Go like me there.
Do it. Get over there. So, like I said, don't forget to buy Tyr's book. Go check out Mercury the Scribe.
Go to darkandstormynights.vegvisirmedia.com to check out the book review, and then buy her book.
So comment, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about us.
And let us know if we're similar to any other genre, because that'd be great.
And if you want to be shouted out on our show, if you want us to mention your Twitter handle or whatever, don't forget to comment and contribute with our show. I will pick names, and when you say something that we mention or give a contribution that'll end up in our story, or even if we're just considering it, I will mention your Twitter handle on the show. So, anything else, guys?
No, I think we're good. Other than comparable titles, like I said.
Comparable titles.
Yeah, Well, we were saying that we have a limited experience in reading the steampunk genre, so if there's something that that we're similar, it'd be helpful for us to submit.
Hell, feel free to contribute your steampunk title suggestions for our book. So.
Ooh, indeed.
Yes, currently we're at Death, Dreaming, and Devilish Things.
And once again, don't forget to check out our last episode and let us know which story idea you liked best. We'll talk to you next week.